The first shot rang out across the dusty plains of Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, 1876, startling Olivia Lancaster from her frantic packing. The second shot made her hands tremble so violently that she dropped the small silver locket, her mother's final gift, onto the wooden floorboards. The third shot never came, and in its terrible absence, Olivia knew her fate was sealed. "He's coming," she whispered to the empty room, her heart pounding like a stampede against her ribs. Her father would return any minute, reeking of whiskey and rage, to enforce the punishment he'd been threatening for weeks. Outside, the setting sun painted the desert in hues of amber and crimson, colors too beautiful for such a day of reckoning. Olivia had just turned 20, but instead of celebration, she faced imprisonment. Her crime: being found in conversation with the new schoolteacher, a kind young man who had merely offered to lend her books. The sound of horse hooves pounding the dirt path leading to their modest ranch house made her stomach clench. Through the window, she could see her father's imposing figure dismounting, his movements jerky with anger. Behind him rode two men she recognized as his mining partner's witnesses to whatever spectacle he planned. "Olivia," his voice thundered through the house, "get down here now." With trembling fingers, she retrieved the locket and slipped it into her pocket. There was no escape now. Her plans to flee before his return had been cut short. Taking a deep breath, she descended the narrow staircase, holding her head high despite the fear coursing through her veins. Terence Lancaster stood in the main room, his wide-brimmed hat still on, dust coating his clothes and fury etched into every line of his weathered face. At 53, he remained a powerful man, hardened by years of mining and ranching in the unforgiving territory. After her mother's death from fever 3 years prior, his drinking had worsened, and with it, his paranoia about losing his only daughter. "Found her with that fancy-talking schoolteacher again," he announced to his companions without looking at Olivia, filling her head with ideas above her station. "Pa, we were just talking about books," Olivia said softly, fighting to keep her voice steady. Mr. Phillips was simply the back of his hand connected with her cheek before she could finish, sending her stumbling against the wall. The sting bloomed across her face, but she refused to cry out. "Don't you lie to me, girl," he roared. "I've seen how men look at you, just like they looked at your mother, and I know what comes of it, nothing but heartache and shame." One of the men, a wiry character named Dobbs, shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Terence, maybe you're being a bit harsh on the girl." Her father turned his rage toward Dobbs. "You questioning how I raise my daughter? She's been sneaking around behind my back, disobeying my direct orders. Next thing, she'll be running off with some smooth-talking drifter, leaving me alone in my old age." "I would never abandon you, Pa," Olivia said, though the words tasted like lies on her tongue. Hadn't she been planning exactly that not 10 minutes ago? Terence grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "I've made my decision. You're staying in the old storage room until you learn your place." He dragged her toward the back of the house. "I've fixed it up real nice, put bars on the window so you can't get any foolish ideas." Olivia's blood ran cold. The storage room was little more than a glorified cellar, dark and damp with only a tiny window near the ceiling. "Pa, please, you can't mean to lock me away. Watch me." He shoved her into the room, where she saw with horror that he'd indeed prepared for this. A narrow cot sat in one corner, a chamber pot in another. The single window high on the wall now bore 3 iron bars, freshly installed. "You'll stay here until you come to your senses about your place in this world." "Terence," the other man, Hollister, spoke up, "this ain't right." "She's a grown woman. She's my daughter," he roared. And under my roof she follows my rules." He turned back to Olivia, lowering his voice. "Your mother was beautiful like you, and it brought her nothing but pain. Men used her, made promises they never kept. I'm protecting you from yourself." "By imprisoning me," Olivia fought back tears. "Mother would be ashamed of what you've become." His face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare speak of her. It's for her I'm doing this, to honor the promise I made to keep you safe." Before she could respond, he slammed the heavy wooden door. The sound of a padlock clicking into place echoed in the small space, followed by his retreating footsteps and murmured conversation with his companions. Olivia sank onto the cot, finally allowing tears to fall. Through the tiny window, she could see a sliver of the darkening sky, stars beginning to emerge. She clutched her mother's locket, opening it to reveal the small portrait inside, a woman with the same auburn hair and green eyes as her own, smiling with a freedom Olivia had never known. "I won't die in here," she whispered to the portrait. "I promise you that." 2 days passed in the dim confines of the storage room. Her father brought food and water twice daily, speaking little. On the 3rd morning, Olivia woke to raised voices in the yard. Climbing onto the cot, she strained to see through the small window but could only make out the shapes of horses and men. "I don't care what you heard, Fletcher. My daughter is ill and not receiving visitors." Her father's voice carried clearly. "With all due respect, Mr. Lancaster, folks in town are concerned." The second voice was deep and measured with a hint of a Texas drawl. "Miss Lancaster hasn't been seen since Wednesday, and there are rumors." Olivia's heart leaped. Someone had noticed her absence. She opened her mouth to call out, then hesitated. Her father would only be enraged further if she brought attention to her imprisonment. "What rumors?" Terence demanded. "That perhaps Miss Lancaster isn't ill at all," the man called Fletcher replied evenly. "That perhaps she's being kept against her will." "That's preposterous." "Who's spreading such lies?" The schoolteacher mentioned his concerns. "And Mrs. Willoughby at the general store said Miss Lancaster never missed their Tuesday reading circle before." "Meddling fools," her father muttered. "Listen here, Fletcher. What happens in my family is my business. My daughter is unwell and needs rest, not gossip and intrusion. Now get off my property before I forget my manners." There was a long pause, and Olivia held her breath. "I'll go for now," Fletcher finally said, his voice now steely with resolve. "But I'll be back to check on Miss Lancaster's recovery. Good day, sir." The sound of hoofbeats retreating made Olivia's hope fade. She slumped back onto the cot, staring at the locked door. Who was this Fletcher? The name wasn't familiar, though Cottonwood Springs was small enough that she knew most residents. Perhaps he was new to town or just passing through. That evening, when her father brought dinner, a bowl of thin stew and a chunk of bread, Olivia tried reasoning with him again. "Pa, people are noticing my absence. You can't keep me locked away forever." Terence set the tray down harder than necessary. "I can do whatever's needed to keep you from ruining your life. I told everyone you're sick with fever. In a few weeks, when you've come to your senses, you can rejoin society properly." And what would that mean? Never speaking to any man, never having a life of my own. Olivia couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "It means respecting my wishes," he snapped. "It means understanding that I know what's best for you. Your mother was just like you, headstrong, beautiful, always with her nose in some book. And look where it got her." "She was happy before she died," Olivia said quietly. "Despite everything, she loved her life. She told me so." Her father's face darkened. "She would have been happier if she'd listened to her father instead of running off with me. I was no good for her, just like these men sniffing around you are no good." The raw pain in his voice made Olivia pause. For the first time, she glimpsed the twisted logic behind his actions. He was trying to protect her from men like himself. Pa, she said gently, not every man is going to hurt me, and even if they might, it's my choice to make, my life to live. He shook his head, already backing toward the door. You'll thank me someday. When you're older, you'll understand. After he left, Olivia picked at the stew, her appetite diminished by despair. The room was growing colder as night fell, and she wrapped herself in the thin blanket he'd provided. With nothing else to do, she closed her eyes and tried to imagine herself somewhere else riding across open plains, wind in her hair, no walls to contain her. She must have fallen asleep, for the next thing she knew, she was jolted awake by a soft scraping sound at her window. Disoriented, she sat up, squinting into the darkness. A shadow moved across the tiny patch of night sky visible through the barred window. Miss Lancaster, a low voice called. Are you in there? Heart racing, Olivia scrambled onto the cot. Yes, who's there? Name's Fletcher Blackwood. I was here earlier today. I'm here to help if you want it. Yes, she whispered urgently. My father's locked me in. The door has a padlock. I figured as much. Stand back from the window. Olivia moved away, and moments later she heard metal grinding against metal. The bars were being removed. After several minutes of effort, the shadow at the window grew larger. I can't fit through, the voice said, frustration evident. I'll have to come through the house. Is your father armed? He keeps a rifle by his bed and a pistol on the mantel, she replied, worry creeping into her voice. Please be careful. I don't want anyone hurt. Don't worry about me, Miss Lancaster. I've handled worse than angry fathers. The shadow disappeared, and Olivia was left in silence, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would wake her father. Minutes stretched like hours as she strained to hear any sound from the main house. Then came a crash that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building, followed by her father's startled shout. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house, accompanied by the sound of furniture being overturned. Where is she? Fletcher's voice boomed, all pretense of stealth abandoned. Get out of my house, her father roared back. I'll kill you for this intrusion. Another crash, then the sound of a struggle. Olivia pressed herself against the door, terrified of what might be happening. A gunshot made her jump back, a scream caught in her throat. Moments later, footsteps approached her door. The padlock rattled, then a tremendous splintering sound filled the air as something heavy slammed against the wood. Once, twice on the third impact, the door frame cracked and the door burst inward. Framed in the doorway stood the tallest man Olivia had ever seen. Moonlight from the main room silhouetted his broad shoulders and the cowboy hat atop his head. In one hand, he held a lantern, the other was extended toward her. Miss Lancaster, he said, his voice softer now. I believe you requested an escape. For a moment, Olivia couldn't move, couldn't speak. This stranger had just broken into her home, fought her father, and shattered her prison door all for her. My father, she began, concerned despite everything. He's fine. Unconscious, but breathing. I don't make a habit of killing fathers, no matter how misguided. Fletcher stepped into the room, his features becoming visible in the lantern light. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes the color of a summer storm. A thin scar ran along his left cheekbone, and his dark hair curled slightly where it escaped his hat. We need to go quickly, he continued. He won't stay down long, and I'd rather not fight him again. Olivia hesitated only briefly before grabbing her mother's locket from beneath the pillow. I'm ready. Fletcher nodded, then in one smooth motion, extinguished the lantern and swept her into his arms. Olivia gasped at the unexpected movement, automatically wrapping her arms around his neck. Faster this way, he explained as he carried her through the darkened house. Floors covered in broken glass. Outside, the cool night air felt like freedom against Olivia's skin. Two horses waited in the yard, Fletcher's large chestnut gelding and a smaller paint mare. "That's Penny," Fletcher said, nodding toward the mare as he set Olivia carefully on her feet. "She's gentle but quick. Can you ride?" "Since I was 6, Olivia replied, already moving toward the horse. A groan from inside the house made them both freeze. "Time to go," Fletcher said, helping her mount before swinging onto his own horse. They rode hard until the ranch disappeared behind them, taking a trail that wound through sagebrush and mesquite toward the mountains. Only when they reached a ridge overlooking the valley did Fletcher signal to slow their pace. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice as he studied her face in the moonlight. Olivia realized she was smiling despite everything. "Yes," she said, surprised to find it true. "I'm better than I've been in years." "Good," he nodded, satisfied. "We'll head to my cabin for tonight. It's about 2 hours' ride from here. Tomorrow we can figure out what you want to do next." "What I want," Olivia repeated softly, the concept almost foreign to her. "I'm not sure anyone's ever asked me that before." Fletcher's expression softened. "Well, it's about time someone did." He adjusted his hat and pointed toward a faint trail winding into the foothills. "My place is up that way. Not much to look at, but it's secure. Your father won't find us there." As they rode side by side through the desert night, Olivia felt a strange sense of peace despite the uncertainty ahead. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own path, even if that path had been forcibly opened by a mysterious cowboy with storm-gray eyes. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked as they navigated a narrow pass between two rock formations. "You don't even know me." Fletcher was quiet for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low and thoughtful. "I know what it's like to be trapped," he said simply. "No one deserves that." Something in his tone suggested personal experience, but Olivia didn't press. There would be time for stories later. For now, it was enough to follow this stranger into the night, trusting that whatever awaited her would be better than the prison she'd left behind. The cabin appeared as a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. It was larger than Olivia had expected, a proper structure, rather than the simple shelter she'd imagined. Fletcher dismounted and helped Olivia down from her horse, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Home, sweet home," he said with a touch of self-deprecation. "At least for now." As they approached, Olivia noticed details in the moonlight. A covered porch wrapped around two sides, curtains visible through the windows, a stack of firewood neatly arranged beside the door. This wasn't the temporary dwelling of a drifter. Someone had built this place to last. Inside, Fletcher lit a lamp, revealing a surprisingly comfortable interior. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by bookshelves filled with volumes. A solid wooden table and chairs occupied the center of the room, while a cooking area was arranged neatly in one corner. Two doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. "You have books," Olivia said in wonder, moving toward the shelves. Fletcher smiled slightly as he built a fire in the hearth. "Can't claim to have read them all, but I enjoy the company they provide on long winter nights." Olivia ran her fingers over the spines, recognizing titles by Dickens, Twain, and even Shakespeare alongside practical manuals on ranching and medicine. "This is the most beautiful place I've ever seen," she said honestly. Fletcher looked up from the fire, surprise evident on his face. "It's just a cabin. It's freedom," she replied simply, his expression softened with understanding. "Well, it's yours for as long as you need it. You can take the bedroom through that door." He pointed to the right. "I'll sleep out here. I couldn't put you out of your own bed." "It's no trouble. I've slept on worse than a floor beside a fire." He stood, dusting his hands on his trousers. "Are you hungry? I don't have much, but there's bread and some jerky." Olivia suddenly realized she was famished. The meager meals her father had provided during her captivity had done little to sustain her. "Yes, please. And perhaps some water." They shared a simple meal at the table, the fire casting dancing shadows across the walls. As they ate, Olivia studied her rescuer more carefully. By lamplight, she could see that Fletcher Blackwood was handsome in a rugged way, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. His hands were calloused from work, yet he handled his cup and plate with a surprising grace. "How did you know I was being held prisoner?" she asked finally. Fletcher set down his cup. "Small towns have big ears," he said. "I've been working as a hired hand at the Wallace Ranch for the past month. When I came into town for supplies 3 days ago, I heard the school teacher talking to the sheriff about his concerns for you." His jaw tightened. "The sheriff dismissed him, said your father was a respected man who could handle his own affairs." "Sheriff Donnelly owes my father for helping fund his campaign," Olivia explained bitterly. "He'd never cross him. That's what I figured, so I decided to look into it myself." Fletcher's gaze was direct. "I know what it means when a man suddenly starts telling everyone his daughter is too ill for visitors. And you just decided to rescue me. A woman you'd never met," he shrugged, but there was nothing casual about the intensity in his eyes. "Some things are just plain wrong, Miss Lancaster. A father locking away his daughter is one of them. Please call me Olivia," she said. "After tonight, I think we're well past formalities." A small smile touched his lips. "Olivia, then, and I'm Fletcher, though most folks just call me Fletch." "Fletcher suits you better," she decided. "It has more substance," he chuckled softly, the sound warming something inside her. "Never had anyone analyze my name before." The conversation flowed easily after that. Fletcher told her about growing up in Texas, losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, and spending years drifting from ranch to ranch, picking up work where he could find it. "What brought you to Arizona Territory?" Olivia asked. A shadow passed over his face. "Needed a fresh start," he said simply, and she sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. In turn, she told him about her life in Cottonwood Springs, her mother's death, her father's increasing control, her love of books and learning. "I've always wanted to teach," she confessed. "Mr. Phillips, the school teacher," he said, "I have a natural gift for it. That's why I was speaking with him, despite my father's prohibitions." "Your father didn't want you to teach." Olivia shook her head. "He said no decent man would marry a woman who put herself above others with book learning. That I'd end up alone and regretful." Fletcher's expression hardened. "Your father is wrong," he said firmly. "Education is never something to be ashamed of." His support, so freely given, brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, embarrassed by the display of emotion. "It's late," Fletcher said gently, noticing her fatigue. "You should rest. Tomorrow will bring enough decisions and challenges." He showed her to the bedroom, which was simply furnished with a bed, a small dresser, and a washstand. "There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash up," he said. "And I put some of my clothes on the bed. They'll be too big, but they're clean. We can figure out something better tomorrow." "Thank you," Olivia said, suddenly overwhelmed by his kindness. "For everything." Fletcher nodded, his hand resting briefly on the doorframe. "Sleep well, Olivia. You're safe here." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed. The events of the day crashed over her: her imprisonment, the dramatic rescue, this strange new situation. She should have been terrified, spending the night in a remote cabin with a man she barely knew. Instead, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. She washed her face and hands, then changed into the offered clothing, a soft flannel shirt that hung to her knees. The bed was firm but comfortable, the blankets clean and warm. Outside, she could hear the gentle sounds of Fletcher moving about the cabin, banking the fire for the night. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was slow in coming. Her mind raced with questions about what the morning would bring. Would her father come looking for her? Would Fletcher truly help her find her own path, or did he have expectations she couldn't yet see? Eventually, the rhythmic hooting of an owl outside lulled her into a dreamless sleep, deeper and more restful than any she'd experienced in years. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains when Olivia woke. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then memory flooded back her father, the locked room, Fletcher breaking down the door, their midnight ride to this cabin. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, folding Fletcher's borrowed shirt neatly on the bed. When she opened the bedroom door, she found the main room empty, though the fire had been rekindled and a pot of coffee sat warming on the stove. Through the window, she could see Fletcher in the yard, chopping wood with powerful, efficient strokes. Olivia poured herself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. The morning air was crisp with the promise of a beautiful day. From this vantage point, she could see for miles rolling hills covered in sage and juniper stretching toward distant mountains. "Morning," Fletcher called, setting down his axe and wiping his brow with his shirt sleeve. "Sleep well. Better than I have in years," she replied honestly. "Your cabin has good energy." He smiled at that, a full smile that transformed his face and made her heart skip unexpectedly. "Glad to hear it. I've got eggs and bacon if you're hungry." Over breakfast, they discussed options for Olivia's future. "Your father will be looking for you," Fletcher said. "And in a town as small as Cottonwood Springs, it won't take long for someone to connect me to your disappearance." "What do you suggest?" Olivia asked, suddenly anxious. The freedom of the previous night seemed more tenuous in the light of day. Fletcher considered for a moment. "We could head to Prescott. It's bigger, you could find work there as a teacher's assistant maybe, start building a life away from your father's influence." "And you?" Olivia found herself asking. "Would you go back to the Wallace Ranch?" Something complicated passed through his eyes. "I wasn't planning to stay in the area much longer anyway. I could escort you to Prescott, make sure you're settled safely." The thought of parting ways with Fletcher so soon left an unexpected hollow feeling in Olivia's chest. Before she could examine the sensation further, a distant sound caught their attention: horses approaching. Fletcher was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. "Riders coming up the trail," he said, his voice tense. "3 of them." Olivia's stomach clenched. "My father can't tell yet. But I don't get many visitors out here." Fletcher moved to a cabinet and withdrew a Winchester rifle. "Stay inside, away from the windows." He stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Olivia watched through a gap in the curtains as 3 riders came into view, her father in the lead, flanked by Sheriff Donnelly and another man she didn't recognize. "Blackwood!" Her father shouted, his face mottled with rage. "I know she's in there. Bring my daughter out now." Fletcher stood his ground, calm in the face of Terence Lancaster's fury. "Good morning, gentlemen. What brings you to my property?" Sheriff Donnelly urged his horse forward. "Now listen here, Blackwood. We know you took the Lancaster girl. That's kidnapping, and I'm here to arrest you and return her to her father." "Is it kidnapping to free someone who's being held prisoner?" Fletcher asked evenly. "Miss Lancaster was locked in a room against her will. I merely provided her a way out." "That's a lie," Terence roared. "She's my daughter, under my protection." The third man, who Olivia now recognized as Judge Wilson from the county court, spoke up. Mr. Blackwood, these are serious allegations from both sides. Perhaps we could speak with Miss Lancaster directly and determine her wishes." Olivia didn't wait for Fletcher's response. Drawing a deep breath, she stepped onto the porch, moving to stand beside him. "I'm here of my own free will," she said clearly. "Mr. Blackwood rescued me from imprisonment." Her father's face darkened further. "Olivia, you get on my horse right now. We're going home." "No, Pa." The word felt foreign on her tongue. She'd never directly refused him before. "I'm 20 years old. I have the right to choose my own path." "Judge Wilson," Fletcher said, never taking his eyes off the mounted men, "you're a man of the law. Tell me, is it legal for a father to lock his adult daughter in a barred room against her will?" The judge looked uncomfortable. "Well, no, not strictly speaking. But family matters are generally—" "This isn't a family matter anymore," Olivia interrupted. "This is about my freedom as a person." Sheriff Donnelly shifted in his saddle. "Lancaster, you told me she was ill, that this man had taken advantage and abducted her." "She is ill in the head," Terrence snapped. "Just like her mother was, needs a firm hand to keep her from ruin." "I'm perfectly sound of mind," Olivia retorted, anger giving her courage. "And I refuse to return to that house to be locked away again." The judge studied her face, then looked at Fletcher's protective stance beside her. Something in his expression shifted. "Sheriff, I'm not seeing evidence of a crime here. The young lady appears to be acting of her own volition." "This is outrageous," Terrence exploded. "She's my daughter." "She's also an adult," Judge Wilson replied firmly. "Unless Miss Lancaster wishes to press charges against her father for unlawful imprisonment, which would be within her rights, I suggest we consider this a family disagreement and nothing more." Fletcher's posture relaxed slightly, though he kept the rifle ready. "I believe the judge has spoken, gentlemen. Miss Lancaster is staying here for now by her own choice." For a moment, Olivia thought her father might charge the porch. His hands were white-knuckled on his reins, his face contorted with fury. Then abruptly, his expression changed to one of cold calculation. "Fine," he said with dangerous calm. "If that's how you want it, daughter. But know this, you're no longer welcome in my home. And you," he pointed at Fletcher, "you'll regret the day you interfered in my family." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away. After an awkward moment, the sheriff tipped his hat. "Miss Lancaster, Mr. Blackwood, good day to you both." He and the judge followed Terrence down the trail. Olivia's legs suddenly felt weak. Fletcher guided her to a chair on the porch, setting his rifle aside. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, though tears threatened. "I've never stood up to him like that before." "You were magnificent," Fletcher said, and the pride in his voice made her flush with pleasure. "Will he come back?" she asked, looking down the now empty trail. Fletcher's expression grew serious. "Eventually. Men like your father don't give up easily when their pride is wounded, but we've bought some time with the judge's ruling." "We," Olivia repeated, hope fluttering in her chest. His eyes met hers, steady and certain. "I won't abandon you, Olivia, not until I'm sure you're safe and settled." It wasn't a declaration of anything beyond protection, yet Olivia felt warmed by his words. "Thank you," she said simply. The rest of the day passed in a strange domestic tranquility. Fletcher showed Olivia around the property, the small stable where he kept his horses, a vegetable garden beginning to sprout spring crops, a clear stream running along the western edge of his land. They discussed plans for traveling to Prescott in a few days, once Fletcher was confident they weren't being watched. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Olivia found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind since morning. "Fletcher, why were you planning to leave the area? You have a beautiful home here." He stared into the flames for a long moment. "I don't stay anywhere too long," he finally said. "It's safer that way." Safer for whom? His gaze flicked to her face, then back to the fire. For everyone. Olivia sensed there was much he wasn't saying. You're running from something. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. Someone. But that's a story for another time. Despite her curiosity, Olivia respected his reluctance. Everyone had secrets after all. Her own past was hardly an open book. I understand, she said softly. But if you ever want to share that story, I'm a good listener. Fletcher's expression softened as he looked at her. I believe you are, Olivia Lancaster. I believe you are. The next 3 days fell into an easy rhythm. Olivia helped with chores around the cabin, finding satisfaction in the simple tasks of cooking, cleaning, and tending the garden. Fletcher seemed both amused and impressed by her willingness to work. Most young ladies of your background would consider this beneath them, he commented as she efficiently chopped vegetables for a stew. Olivia smiled. My father may have had pretensions to wealth and status, but we were hardly affluent. I've been cooking and cleaning since my mother died. You do it well, he said, the compliment making her cheeks warm. On the third night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Fletcher broached a subject they'd been avoiding. We should leave for Prescott tomorrow, he said, his deep voice breaking the comfortable silence. I don't trust your father's absence. He's planning something. Olivia nodded, though the thought of leaving the peaceful cabin filled her with unexpected regret. Have you been to Prescott before? A few times. It's a decent town, territorial capital, so there's more law and order than some places. You could find respectable work there, maybe even teaching like you wanted. And you, she asked, turning to study his profile in the fading light. What will you do after I'm settled? Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. Move on, I suppose. That's what I do. Because of whoever you're running from, he glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. You don't forget much, do you? Not when it matters, she replied softly. Fletcher sighed, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. His name is Victor Caldwell. 5 years ago, he was a powerful rancher in Texas, the kind of man who thought his money could buy anything, including justice. Olivia remained silent, sensing he needed to tell the story in his own way. I was working as a ranch foreman near Fort Worth, Fletcher continued. Caldwell's son, Marcus, had a reputation for cruelty to animals, to women, to anyone he considered beneath him. One night he went too far with a young woman who worked at the local hotel. Her brother came to me for help. His hands tightened into fists as he spoke. I confronted Marcus. Things got heated. He drew on me and I was faster. Fletcher's eyes met hers. I killed him, Olivia. It was self-defense, but that didn't matter to Victor Caldwell. He swore he'd see me hang, and when he couldn't manage that legally, he put a price on my head. So you've been running ever since, Olivia said softly. Fletcher nodded. 5 years of looking over my shoulder, never staying in one place long enough to be found. Caldwell's men have come close a few times. Is that how you got this? Olivia reached out tentatively, her fingers hovering near the scar on his cheekbone. Yes, he said simply, not pulling away from her touch. 2 years ago in Colorado, I was careless, let myself get comfortable. It won't happen again. The weight of his words settled between them. Olivia understood now why he'd been so quick to help her, why he recognized the prison her father had created. Fletcher Blackwood knew what it meant to be hunted, to have your freedom threatened. Thank you for telling me, she said, finally lowering her hand. Fletcher's gaze was intense in the gathering darkness. You deserve to know who you're traveling with. A good man, she said without hesitation. One who risked his life to save a stranger. He looked away, clearly uncomfortable with her assessment. We should turn in early. It's a long ride to Prescott. As Olivia prepared for bed that night, her mind raced with new understanding. Fletcher's revelation explained so much: his readiness with weapons, his alertness to approaching riders, his reluctance to form attachments. He'd built a life designed for quick departure. Yet he'd put all that at risk to help her. The thought warmed her in ways she couldn't quite articulate, even to herself. Morning brought clear skies and cool air, perfect weather for traveling. Fletcher had packed provisions and essentials the night before, leaving them only to saddle the horses and secure the cabin. "Will you come back here?" Olivia asked as she watched him lock the front door. "Eventually, perhaps. It's as close to a home as I've had in years." His expression was wistful as he surveyed the cabin. "But it's not safe right now, not with your father knowing its location." They mounted their horses, Fletcher on his chestnut gelding, Thunder, and Olivia on the paint mare, Penny. The trail leading away from the cabin wound through pine-covered hills before connecting with a wider road that would take them to Prescott. They'd been riding for perhaps 2 hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky, when Fletcher suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. His posture had gone rigid, head cocked as though listening. "What is it?" Olivia whispered, scanning the surrounding forest. "Not sure," he murmured. "Something doesn't feel right." He dismounted in one fluid motion, handing his reins to Olivia. "Stay here. I'm going to check the ridge ahead." Before she could protest, he moved silently into the trees, drawing his pistol as he went. Olivia watched anxiously, the horses shifting beneath her, sensing her tension. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the silence. Olivia gasped as Fletcher dropped to the ground, rolling behind a boulder as a second shot kicked up dirt near his position. "Ambush," he shouted to her. "Ride back to the cabin. Now." Instead, Olivia slid from her horse and darted behind a large pine, her heart racing. She wouldn't leave him to face this alone. More shots rang out, coming from multiple directions. Olivia realized with horror that they were surrounded. Fletcher returned fire from behind the boulder, his movements calculated and precise. "Blackwood." A voice called from the trees. "We just want the girl. Send her out and you can ride away." "Go to hell, Lancaster," Fletcher shouted back, confirming Olivia's suspicion that her father was behind the attack. A bullet splintered bark inches from Olivia's head, making her duck lower. She needed to reach Fletcher, to help somehow. 20 feet of open ground separated them, 20 feet that might as well have been 20 miles under the current circumstances. Then she saw a shallow depression running from her position toward Fletcher's boulder. If she stayed low, it might provide enough cover to reach him. Taking a deep breath, Olivia dropped to her stomach and began crawling through the depression, keeping her head down as bullets continued to fly overhead. The rough ground scraped her hands and knees, but she pressed on, fear for Fletcher overriding her own safety concerns. She was halfway to him when she heard a pained grunt from his direction. Glancing up, she saw Fletcher clutching his left arm, blood seeping between his fingers. "Fletcher." She gasped, abandoning caution to scramble the remaining distance to his side. "Damn it, Olivia," he hissed as she reached him. "I told you to ride away." "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind his wounded arm. "How many are there?" "At least 5, including your father." Fletcher winced as she tightened the makeshift bandage. "We're outnumbered and outgunned." Olivia finished securing the bandage, her mind racing. "The horses." "Probably scattered after the first shots," Fletcher said grimly. "We're on foot now." "Blackwood," Terence Lancaster's voice came again. "This is your last chance. Send out my daughter or we're coming in after you both." Fletcher checked his pistol, 4 bullets remaining. His rifle lay useless yards away, dropped when he was first shot. "I'm open to suggestions," he said to Olivia, his expression grim but determined. Olivia peered around the boulder, trying to locate their attackers. She caught a glimpse of movement in the trees to their left, a man repositioning for a better shot. "My father won't kill me," she said suddenly. "That's our advantage. He wants me alive." Fletcher's eyes narrowed. "What are you thinking?" "A distraction," she replied, already formulating a plan. "If I show myself, draw their attention." "Absolutely not," Fletcher cut her off. "Too dangerous." "More dangerous than sitting here waiting to be shot," Olivia challenged. "Fletcher, trust me, I know my father. He won't let them fire if there's a risk of hitting me." Before he could argue further, she raised her voice. "Pa, it's Olivia. I'm coming out to talk." "Olivia." "No," Fletcher grabbed for her, but she was already moving, stepping out from behind the boulder with her hands raised. "Pa," she called again. "Call off your men. Let's discuss this civilly." For a moment, silence fell over the forest. Then Terence Lancaster emerged from the trees, rifle in hand but not aimed. "Smart girl," he said, a triumphant smile spreading across his weathered face. "I knew you'd see reason eventually." "I'm not coming home with you," Olivia said clearly, taking a careful step forward. From the corner of her eye, she saw Fletcher positioning himself at the edge of the boulder, pistol ready. "I just want this violence to end." Her father scowled. "You don't have a choice, daughter. You're coming home where you belong." "And Fletcher?" she asked, taking another step forward, drawing attention away from the boulder. "What about him?" "The cowboy," Terence spat. "He'll get what's coming to him for interfering in my family." Another man emerged from the trees to Olivia's right, one of the miners who had been present when her father locked her away. He held a shotgun pointed loosely in Fletcher's direction. "Mr. Lancaster," Olivia said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "Fletcher Blackwood saved me from imprisonment. He's a good man who deserves your gratitude, not your wrath." Her father's face darkened. "Gratitude? He broke into my home, assaulted me, and stole my daughter. The only thing he deserves is a shallow grave." "I wasn't stolen," Olivia's patience snapped. "I was rescued from a prison you created." "You had no right to lock me away like an animal." "I had every right," Terence roared. "You're my daughter, my responsibility." "I'm a person," Olivia shouted back, genuine anger giving power to her words. "Not your possession." As they argued, Olivia noticed Fletcher inching along the perimeter of the boulder, using their heated exchange as cover for his movement. He needed just a few more seconds of distraction. "Dobbs," her father suddenly called to the miner, "get behind that rock and drag out the cowboy." "I'm tired of this conversation." Before Dobbs could move, Fletcher sprang from behind the boulder, pistol aimed directly at Terence Lancaster's chest. "Drop the rifle," he commanded, voice deadly calm despite his wounded arm. Terence froze, rage and surprise warring on his face. The other men emerged from their hiding places, weapons trained on Fletcher. "You're outnumbered, Blackwood," one of them said. "You can't shoot us all." "No," Fletcher agreed evenly, "but I won't miss Lancaster, and I'm willing to bet none of you are eager to die for his cause today." A tense silence fell over the clearing. Olivia held her breath, acutely aware that the next few moments would determine their fate. "Lower your weapons," a new voice called from the trees. All heads turned to see Sheriff Donnelly emerging on horseback, rifle ready. Behind him rode Judge Wilson and two deputies. "This doesn't concern you, Sheriff," Terence growled, not lowering his rifle. "5 armed men ambushing travelers on a public road," Donnelly replied dryly. "I'd say that falls squarely under my jurisdiction." Judge Wilson urged his horse forward. "Mr. Lancaster, I warned you yesterday that your daughter is legally entitled to make her own choices. This armed pursuit crosses the line into criminal behavior." "She's my daughter," Terence insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. She's a free citizen of the territory, the judge countered firmly. Now lower your weapon before I have the sheriff arrest you for attempted murder. For a moment, it seemed Terence might defy even this authority. Then, with a curse, he lowered his rifle. His men followed suit, their expressions ranging from relief to disappointment. Fletcher kept his pistol trained on Terence until the sheriff and his deputies had collected all weapons from Lancaster's group. Only then did he lower his arm, the effort clearly causing him pain. "Mr. Blackwood needs medical attention," Olivia said to the sheriff, moving quickly to Fletcher's side. "He's been shot." Sheriff Donnelly nodded. "We'll escort you both to Prescott. The doctor there can tend to his wound." He turned to Terence and his men. "As for you gentlemen, you'll be coming with us to answer some questions about this morning's activities." As the deputies organized the subdued ambushers, Judge Wilson approached Olivia and Fletcher. "Miss Lancaster, are you certain about your decision to leave your father's home? It's not too late to reconsider." Olivia looked at Fletcher, who stood tall despite his injury, his eyes meeting hers with quiet support. Then she turned to her father, seeing clearly for the first time the fear and possessiveness that had twisted his love into something controlling and harmful. "I'm certain, Your Honor," she said firmly. "My future lies elsewhere." The judge nodded, satisfied. "Very well. Sheriff Donnelly and I will ensure your safe passage to Prescott." As they prepared to depart, Terence Lancaster called out one last time, "Olivia, you're making a terrible mistake." Olivia paused, then walked back to face her father directly. "The mistake was believing I needed your permission to live my own life," she said quietly. "I hope someday you'll understand that. Until then, goodbye, Pa." She turned away from him, back straight and head high, to rejoin Fletcher and their unexpected escorts. Whatever the future held, she would face it on her own terms, no longer imprisoned by her father's fears. The journey to Prescott was slow but uneventful. Fletcher's wound, though painful, proved to be a clean shot through the flesh of his upper arm, missing bone and major blood vessels. The sheriff's deputies had recovered their scattered horses, allowing them to ride rather than walk. They arrived in Prescott as the sun was setting, the territorial capital's buildings silhouetted against the darkening sky. After seeing Fletcher to the doctor's office, Sheriff Donnelly arranged rooms for them at the Arizona Hotel, separate accommodations befitting a respectable, unmarried woman and her escort. "Your father and his men will be held until the circuit judge can hear their case," Donnelly explained as they stood in the hotel lobby. "Judge Wilson believes they'll likely face fines rather than jail time, but the incident should be enough to discourage further pursuit." "Thank you, Sheriff," Olivia said sincerely, "for everything." After the sheriff departed, Olivia sat in the hotel's small dining room, waiting for Fletcher to return from the doctor. Her mind whirled with the day's events and the sudden reality of her new situation. She was truly on her own now, in a strange city, with only the clothes on her back and whatever future she could build for herself. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Fletcher appeared in the dining room doorway, his left arm properly bandaged and supported by a sling. Despite his injury and the day's exertions, he looked strong and capable as ever. Something fluttered in Olivia's chest at the sight of him, a feeling she wasn't yet ready to examine too closely. "Doctor says I'll live," he said with a slight smile, taking the seat across from her. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not the one who was shot," she pointed out. "No, but you've had your entire life upended in the span of a few days," Fletcher replied. "That's a different kind of wound." His perceptiveness touched her. "I'm uncertain," she admitted, "but not regretful." They ordered a simple dinner, both too exhausted for much conversation. As they finished their meal, Fletcher broached the subject they'd been avoiding. I've been thinking about next steps, he said carefully. Sheriff Donnelly mentioned that the local school is seeking an assistant teacher. With your education and interests, it might be a good position for you. Olivia nodded slowly. That sounds promising. And what about you? Fletcher stared into his coffee cup. I should move on. Your father knows my face now and word travels. If Caldwell's men are anywhere in the territory, they'll hear about the incident. Though she'd expected this answer, disappointment still washed over Olivia. In just a few days, Fletcher Blackwood had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. I understand, she said softly. Fletcher looked up, his gray eyes troubled. Olivia, he stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. I want you to be safe, to have the life you deserve. And that life doesn't include you. The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something flickered in his expression, longing, perhaps, quickly suppressed. It can't. Not while Caldwell is hunting me. I wouldn't bring that danger to your doorstep. Olivia wanted to argue, to tell him that she wasn't afraid, that together they might face whatever came. But the words died in her throat. She barely knew this man, despite the intense circumstances that had thrown them together. What right did she have to ask him to stay? When will you leave? She asked instead. In a few days, he replied. After I'm sure you're settled and your father's case is resolved. Olivia nodded, fighting back unexpected tears. Thank you for everything. Fletcher reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly. You don't need to thank me, Olivia. You saved yourself as much as I saved you. The next morning, Sheriff Donnelly escorted Olivia to the schoolhouse to meet with the headmaster, a dignified older gentleman named Mr. Hargrove. After hearing Olivia's background and educational experience, limited as it was to her own schooling and self-study, he agreed to hire her on a trial basis. We're desperate for qualified help, he explained as he showed her the classroom where she would assist. The territory is growing faster than our institutions can accommodate. The position came with a small salary and a room in the boarding house where several other unmarried female teachers lived. It wasn't wealth or luxury, but it was independence, something Olivia valued far more. By afternoon, she was settled in her new room, unpacking the few items Fletcher had purchased for her that morning: 2 simple dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, and basic toiletries. It was more than she'd had when fleeing her father's house, but still a humble beginning. A knock at her door revealed Mrs. Pembroke, the boarding house proprietress, a plump woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. There's a gentleman caller for you downstairs, Miss Lancaster, she said, managing to convey both curiosity and disapproval in a single expression. A Mr. Blackwood. I've put him in the parlor, as is proper. Thank you, Mrs. Pembroke, Olivia replied, fighting a smile at the woman's obvious interest in her relationship with Fletcher. I'll be right down. Fletcher stood when she entered the parlor, his hat in his hands. In town clothes rather than his riding gear, with his dark hair neatly combed, he looked almost respectable if one overlooked the sling and the intensity that no proper clothing could disguise. Miss Lancaster, he said formally, aware of Mrs. Pembroke hovering nearby. I hope you're settling in well. I am, thank you, Mr. Blackwood, she replied with equal formality. Would you care to sit? They took seats opposite each other, maintaining a proper distance that felt strange after the intimacy of their shared dangers. I've spoken with the sheriff, Fletcher said, keeping his voice low. Your father has paid his fine and been released, but Judge Wilson made it clear that any further pursuit of you would result in more serious charges. Relief washed over Olivia. Do you think he'll heed the warning? For now, Fletcher nodded. Your father is many things but not stupid. He knows when to retreat and regroup. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of impending separation heavy between them. "When will you leave?" Olivia finally asked, echoing her question from the night before. "Tomorrow," Fletcher replied. "I've purchased supplies and settled my accounts in town." Olivia nodded, fighting to maintain her composure. "Where will you go?" "North, I think. Maybe Idaho or Montana. Somewhere Caldwell's reach isn't as long." He hesitated, then added, "I could write to you." "If you'd like." "I would like that very much," Olivia said softly. Fletcher's expression softened. "I'll send letters through the general delivery at the post office. Safer that way." Another silence fell between them, filled with words neither quite knew how to express. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Pembroke called from the doorway. "I'm afraid visiting hours end at 5 o'clock. House rules." Fletcher stood immediately. "Of course, madam. I was just taking my leave." Olivia rose as well, her heart heavy with things unsaid. "Thank you for calling, Mr. Blackwood." He held her gaze for a long moment. "It was my pleasure, Miss Lancaster." At the front door, away from Mrs. Pembroke's watchful eye, Fletcher paused. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I want you to have this." He pressed something into her hand, a small Derringer pistol, "for protection. I pray you'll never need it, but the world can be dangerous for a woman alone." Olivia closed her fingers around the weapon, touched by his concern. "Thank you, Fletcher. Keep it hidden but accessible," he advised. "And remember, aim straight and don't hesitate." She nodded, slipping the small pistol into her pocket. "I will." Fletcher looked as though he wanted to say more, perhaps even reach for her, but footsteps in the hallway reminded them of their public setting. "Goodbye, Olivia Lancaster," he said formally, tipping his hat. "May your new life bring you all the happiness you deserve." "Goodbye, Fletcher Blackwood," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Safe travels." With a last nod, he turned and walked away, his tall figure silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. Olivia watched until he disappeared around a corner, a strange emptiness growing inside her with each step he took. That night, alone in her new room, Olivia wept for the first time since her rescue, not for the life she'd left behind, but for the man who had helped her find freedom, only to walk away. The next weeks passed in a blur of new experiences and responsibilities. Olivia threw herself into her work at the school, finding joy in helping children learn and grow. Her own education expanded as well, as Mr. Hargrove encouraged her to study advanced subjects in preparation for possibly taking on her own classroom in the future. Life at the boarding house proved both restrictive and comforting. Mrs. Pembroke ran a tight ship, with strict rules about curfews, male visitors, and proper behavior. Yet there was also a sense of community among the women who lived there, mostly teachers and shop clerks, all making their way independently in a world that often viewed unmarried women with suspicion. Olivia made friends, particularly with Emily Thornton, another teacher's assistant who had fled an arranged marriage in California. Their shared experiences of breaking from family expectations created an immediate bond. "Have you heard from your cowboy?" Emily asked one evening as they sat in the small garden behind the boarding house, enjoying the cool evening air. "He's not my cowboy," Olivia protested, though her cheeks warmed at the description. "And no, not yet." Emily smiled knowingly. "The way you described him breaking down that door and carrying you to freedom sounds like something straight from a romance novel." "It wasn't quite that dramatic," Olivia laughed, though in truth, it had been every bit as heroic as it sounded. "Well, I think it's terribly romantic," Emily declared, "and I've seen how your eyes light up whenever you speak of him." Olivia couldn't deny it. Despite their brief acquaintance, Fletcher Blackwood had left an indelible mark on her heart. Each day, she checked at the post office for a letter, trying not to show her disappointment when nothing arrived. 6 weeks after Fletcher's departure. Olivia returned from school to find Mrs. Pembroke waiting for her with an envelope in hand. "This came for you today," she said, eyeing the plain envelope with curiosity. "No return address." Olivia's heart leaped as she recognized the strong, angular handwriting. "Thank you, Mrs. Pembroke," she said, taking the letter and hurrying to her room before the landlady could ask questions. With trembling fingers, she broke the plain seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. "Olivia," it began simply, "I hope this letter finds you well and thriving in your new position. I've thought of you often since leaving Prescott, wondering if you found the happiness and purpose you sought. I'm currently in Wyoming Territory, working at a cattle ranch near Cheyenne. The work is good, the people decent, and so far there's been no sign of trouble following me. The nights are cold, but the stars are magnificent like diamonds scattered across black velvet. I think you would appreciate their beauty. I heard news that Judge Wilson made good on his promise to keep your father in check. I hope this brings you some peace of mind, knowing you can build your life without looking over your shoulder. There's not much else to report. Ranch work is ranch work, wherever you go. But I wanted you to know that I'm alive and well, and that the brief time we spent together remains a bright spot in my memory. If you wish to write back, you can address letters to Fletcher Blackwood, General Delivery, Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory. I'll collect them when I'm in town. Stay safe and strong." If it wasn't a love letter by any measure, no flowery declarations or promises of return, yet Olivia clutched it to her chest as though it were the most precious romance ever penned. Fletcher was alive, safe, and thinking of her. For now, that was enough. That night, she wrote her reply by lamplight, filling 4 pages with details of her new life, her students, the boarding house, the friends she'd made, and the independence she was building. She didn't express the longing she felt, the way she searched for his face in crowds, or how she sometimes woke from dreams where he'd returned for her. Instead, she kept her tone warm but measured, matching his careful distance. The correspondence continued through the summer and into fall, letters exchanged every few weeks, gradually growing longer and more personal. Fletcher wrote of the landscapes he traveled, the people he met, occasionally sharing memories from his past. Olivia told him of her progress at the school, her growing confidence, and her plans to eventually have a classroom of her own. In October, a letter arrived with unexpected news. "I've taken a position as foreman at the Circle M Ranch, 30 miles outside of Cheyenne," Fletcher wrote. "It's a permanent position with good pay and my own cabin on the property. The owner, Thomas McAllister, is getting on in years and needs a reliable man to oversee daily operations. For the first time in a long while, I'm considering putting down roots. Caldwell hasn't made a move in months. My sources say he's been ill, and his obsession with finding me has waned as his health deteriorates. Perhaps there's a future where I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, which brings me to a question I've been avoiding for too long. Olivia, would you consider a visit to Wyoming? The railroad makes the journey reasonably comfortable, and Cheyenne has decent accommodations for a lady traveling alone. I would meet you at the station and ensure your safe return to Prescott afterward. I understand if this is too forward or if your position doesn't allow for such travel. I ask only that you consider it. The thought of seeing you again has become something of a fixation for me, though I've tried to be practical about our situation. Whatever your decision, know that your friendship has meant more to me than I can properly express in writing." Fletcher. Olivia read the letter multiple times, her heart racing at the implications. This wasn't merely an invitation for a friendly visit. Fletcher Blackwood was opening a door to something more. The question was whether she was brave enough to walk through it. The practical obstacles were significant. Her teaching position allowed little time off, and the journey would be expensive. Mrs. Pembroke would certainly not approve of an unmarried woman traveling to visit a bachelor, regardless of the circumstances of their acquaintance. Yet none of these considerations dimmed the surge of joy she felt at the prospect of seeing Fletcher again. Over months of correspondence, her initial attraction had deepened into something more substantial: admiration for his integrity, appreciation for his quiet intelligence, and yes, a persistent longing that no amount of practical living could diminish. After a sleepless night of consideration, Olivia composed her reply. "Dear Fletcher, your invitation has filled me with both excitement and trepidation. The prospect of seeing you again is more appealing than I perhaps should admit in writing. However, there are practical matters to consider. Mr. Hargrove has been generous with my position, but I'm not certain he would approve an extended absence. The journey itself represents a significant expense that would consume most of my modest savings. And I confess, there are social considerations that give me pause, not for my own sake, but because my reputation affects my standing at the school. That said, I find myself unwilling to simply decline. Perhaps a compromise might be possible. The school term ends in December with a 2-week break for Christmas. If I could arrange matters here, would that timing suit your situation? I should be clear, Fletcher. If I were to undertake such a journey, it would be with serious purpose. These months of correspondence have meant a great deal to me, and I believe we both recognize that our connection has grown beyond ordinary friendship. A visit would necessarily be an acknowledgement of that fact, and an exploration of whether something more might be possible between us. I await your thoughts on this matter with anticipation. Yours, Olivia. Her candor surprised even herself as she sealed the envelope. Yet after all they'd been through together, pretense seemed both impossible and unnecessary. If Fletcher Blackwood wished to see her again, he should know exactly what such a reunion might mean. His response came with uncharacteristic speed, arriving barely 2 weeks later. "Olivia, your honesty is refreshing and appreciated. You're right that my invitation carries implications beyond a simple visit between friends. I've tried to be cautious in my correspondence, aware of the constraints of propriety and the complications of our respective situations. But caution feels increasingly like cowardice when I consider what might be possible. The Christmas timing would be perfect. The ranch slows during winter months, and Mr. McAllister is generous with holiday leave. As for the practical concerns, please allow me to address them directly. Enclosed, you'll find a bank draft to cover your travel expenses. Before you object, consider it repayment for the courage you showed in our shared ordeal. Your passage would be first class, with all appropriate accommodations for a lady traveling alone. The railroad is well appointed these days, with separate cars for female passengers and attendants to ensure comfort and safety. Upon your arrival in Cheyenne, you would stay at the Interocean Hotel, which maintains the highest standards of respectability. I would secure separate accommodations elsewhere in town during your visit to avoid any appearance of impropriety. I realize these arrangements may still fall short of perfect propriety, but I hope they demonstrate my respect for your position and reputation. My intention is not to compromise either, but to create an opportunity for us to determine if the connection we've built through letters might flourish in person. If this proposal meets with your approval, please wire your expected arrival date when arrangements are confirmed. I'll be counting the days until December. With deepest regard, Fletcher. The bank draft that fluttered from the envelope represented a sum that made Olivia gasp far more than necessary for the journey, even in first-class accommodations. Her first instinct was to return it with a note explaining that she couldn't accept such generosity. Yet she recognized the gesture for what it was: not charity, but Fletcher removing obstacles that might prevent their reunion. After consulting with Emily, who declared the whole situation deliciously romantic and offered to cover Olivia's classes during her absence, she approached Mr. Hargrove about taking leave during the Christmas break. To her relief, he raised no objections. "You've proven yourself invaluable this term, Miss Lancaster," he said. "A holiday is well-deserved. Wyoming, you say? I have a cousin in Laramie, beautiful country if somewhat harsh in winter." Mrs. Pembroke proved a greater challenge. The boarding house rules technically prohibited extended travel without a proper chaperone, but after Olivia explained that she would be visiting a family friend, not entirely a lie, given that Fletcher had saved her from her father, the landlady reluctantly granted permission. "I expect exemplary behavior, Miss Lancaster," she warned. "This establishment's reputation depends on the conduct of its residents." "Of course, Mrs. Pembroke," Olivia assured her. "I would never do anything to bring disgrace to your house." With all arrangements in place, Olivia sent a telegram to Fletcher confirming her arrival date, December 23rd, with a return journey scheduled for January 2nd. 10 days in Wyoming. 10 days to determine if the connection they'd built through letters could transform into something more substantial. As the date approached, Olivia's excitement mingled with nervousness. What if the chemistry they'd shared during their brief time together had been merely a product of danger and proximity? What if Fletcher had idealized her in her absence? What if she'd done the same with him? Emily helped her prepare, insisting that Olivia needed at least one special dress for when he takes you to dinner in Cheyenne. They pooled resources to purchase a deep green wool dress with subtle velvet trim modest enough for propriety, but flattering enough to turn heads. "He won't know what hit him," Emily declared as Olivia tried on the finished garment. The journey from Prescott to Cheyenne took 3 days, with changes in Denver and Greeley. As Fletcher had promised, the first-class accommodations were comfortable and secure, with separate ladies' cars and attentive staff. Olivia spent the hours watching the landscape change from desert to mountains to high plains, reading, and trying to calm her increasingly frantic nerves. By the time the train pulled into Cheyenne on the afternoon of December 23rd, light snow was falling, dusting the platform with white. Passengers disembarked eagerly, met by waiting family members and friends. Olivia stepped down carefully, scanning the crowd for Fletcher's tall figure. For a moment, she didn't see him, and an irrational fear gripped her. What if he hadn't come? What if something had happened? What if Olivia? The deep voice behind her made her spin around. And there he was, standing a few feet away, hat in hands, looking at her as though she were a mirage that might disappear at any moment. Fletcher Blackwood appeared both familiar and different. His face was the same strong jaw, intense gray eyes, the scar along his cheekbone, but he seemed somehow more settled, less guarded. His clothes were of better quality than she remembered, though still practical for ranch work. Most notably, he'd shaved his stubble and trimmed his hair, giving him a more polished appearance. "Fletcher," she breathed, suddenly unsure of the proper greeting. A handshake seemed too formal, an embrace too forward. He solved the dilemma by stepping forward and taking her gloved hand in both of his. "You're really here," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "I was half convinced you'd change your mind." "Never," she replied honestly. A porter approached with her luggage, breaking the moment. Fletcher arranged for it to be delivered to the Interocean Hotel, then offered Olivia his arm. "The hotel is just 2 blocks from the station," he explained as they stepped out into the snowy street. "I thought we might walk if you're not too tired from your journey. The snow isn't too deep yet." "I'd like that," Olivia said, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. Even through layers of wool and leather, the contact sent a current of awareness through her. Cheyenne was larger and more developed than she'd expected, with substantial brick buildings lining the main streets and gas lamps being lit as evening approached. Holiday decorations adorned storefronts and lampposts, giving the town a festive air. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, taking in the scene. "So different from Arizona." Fletcher nodded. "Wyoming has its own kind of beauty, harsher in some ways but honest about it, no false promises of easy living." The Interocean Hotel stood impressive and stately on a corner lot, its architecture reflecting Cheyenne's rapid growth from frontier town to respectable city. Inside, a Christmas tree stood in the lobby, decorated with glass ornaments and ribbons. Fletcher handled the check-in process efficiently, ensuring Olivia was registered properly and her luggage delivered to her room. The hotel clerk treated him with evident respect, suggesting that Fletcher had established a solid reputation in the town. "I've taken a room at the boarding house down the street," he explained as they stood in the lobby. "Proper and all that." Olivia appreciated the gesture, though part of her couldn't help but wish circumstances were different. "Thank you for arranging everything so thoughtfully." An awkward silence fell between them, both acutely aware that after months of correspondence, they were finally in the same place, able to speak face to face. "Are you hungry?" Fletcher asked. "The hotel dining room is excellent, or there's a smaller place around the corner if you'd prefer something less formal after your journey." "The smaller place sounds perfect," Olivia replied, relieved to have a direction for the evening. They dined at a cozy restaurant that specialized in hearty Western fare, the kind of honest cooking that appealed to ranchers and businessmen alike. Over roast beef and potatoes, they began to bridge the gap between their written words and their physical presence. "The ranch is doing well," Fletcher explained in response to her questions. "McAllister is a fair employer, and he's gradually giving me more authority in operations. I think he's considering me as a potential partner down the line, though nothing's been said outright." "That's wonderful," Olivia said sincerely. "You deserve stability after everything you've been through." Fletcher's expression softened. "And you? Your letters mentioned progress at the school, but how are you really finding independent life?" "Challenging at times," she admitted. "There are moments when I miss having family, however imperfect, but the freedom to make my own choices outweighs any loneliness." "You've shown remarkable courage," Fletcher said, his eyes holding hers across the table. "Not everyone would have the strength to build a new life from nothing." His praise warmed her more than the restaurant's roaring fire. "I had help," she reminded him. "A certain cowboy who broke down a door," Fletcher chuckled, the sound rich and genuine. "I was just the locksmith. You were already plotting your escape." As they finished their meal, the initial awkwardness between them had largely dissipated, replaced by the comfortable rhythm they'd established in their letters, now enhanced by the pleasure of immediate response and shared laughter. Walking back to the hotel through gently falling snow, Olivia felt a growing certainty that her journey had been the right decision. Whatever developed between them during these 10 days, the connection they shared was real and worth exploring. At the hotel entrance, Fletcher paused. "I thought we might ride out to the ranch tomorrow if the weather holds. It's about 2 hours by buggy. McAllister is hosting a Christmas Eve gathering for the ranch hands and neighbors." "I'd like that very much," Olivia said, genuinely pleased at the prospect of seeing Fletcher's new home. I'll call for you at 10 then. He hesitated, then took her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her gloved knuckles. Sleep well, Olivia. I can't tell you how glad I am that you're here. The simple gesture sent warmth cascading through her. Good night, Fletcher. I'll see you in the morning. As promised, Fletcher arrived at the hotel precisely at 10 the next day, driving a handsome covered buggy pulled by 2 matching bay horses. The snow had stopped overnight, leaving a pristine white blanket over the landscape. McAllister insisted I take the good buggy, Fletcher explained as he helped Olivia up into the seat. Said it wouldn't do to bring a lady out to the ranch in a work wagon. Olivia smiled, settling the thick blanket he provided over her lap. He sounds like a considerate employer. He's a good man, Fletcher agreed, climbing up beside her and taking the reins. Old-fashioned in some ways, but fair-minded. The kind who judges people by their actions, not their background. They set off through town and then out onto the open road leading northwest from Cheyenne. The landscape opened up around them, vast white plains stretching toward distant mountains, broken occasionally by stands of pine and low, rolling hills. It's magnificent, Olivia breathed, taking in the expansive view. So different from Arizona, yet beautiful in its own way. Fletcher nodded, his expression reflective. That's what struck me when I first came here, the openness of it all. You can see trouble coming from miles away. Understanding his meaning, Olivia placed her hand briefly on his arm. Have there been any signs of Caldwell's men? Nothing in months, Fletcher replied. My contact in Texas says Caldwell had a stroke in the summer. He's bedridden now, barely able to manage his own affairs, let alone a vendetta. That's a relief, Olivia said sincerely, though I'm sorry for his suffering. Fletcher glanced at her, a smile touching his lips. You would be. That compassion of yours is remarkable. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic hoofbeats of the horses and the gentle swish of runners on snow. Occasionally, Fletcher would point out landmarks or share stories about the area. There's the Circle M, he said eventually, gesturing toward a distant cluster of buildings nestled against a hillside. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and even from a distance, Olivia could see it was a substantial operation, a large main house, a bunkhouse, barns and outbuildings, all well maintained. As they approached, a figure emerged from the main house, a tall, white-haired man who raised his hand in greeting. That's McAllister, Fletcher said, returning the wave. Looks like he's been watching for us. Thomas McAllister proved to be a robust man in his 60s, with a weathered face and keen blue eyes that missed nothing. He greeted Fletcher with a firm handshake and Olivia with courtly manners that belied his frontier surroundings. Miss Lancaster, he said warmly, Fletcher's told me so much about you. It's a pleasure to finally put a face to the name. The pleasure is mine, Mr. McAllister, Olivia replied. Your ranch is beautiful. Built it from nothing 30 years ago, he said with evident pride. Come inside, both of you. Martha's been cooking since dawn, and she'll have my hide if I keep you standing in the cold. Martha, it turned out, was McAllister's housekeeper, a capable woman in her 50s who ran the household with cheerful efficiency. She welcomed Olivia with immediate warmth, ushering her into the kitchen for hot coffee while the men took care of the horses. So you're the young lady who's had our Fletcher writing letters every week, Martha said, eyes twinkling as she poured coffee into a china cup, clearly the good set, reserved for special guests. Olivia blushed. Has he mentioned me often? Mentioned you? My dear, he practically glows when he returns from town with one of your letters. Martha set a plate of cookies beside the coffee cup. It's been good to see. That man carried too many shadows when he first arrived. Before Olivia could respond, Fletcher and McAllister returned, stamping snow from their boots in the mudroom. "I'm showing Fletcher's lady the house, Thomas," Martha announced. "You men can make yourselves useful elsewhere for a bit." McAllister chuckled. "Yes, madam. Come on, Fletcher. Those decorations for the party won't hang themselves." As the men departed, Martha led Olivia on a tour of the sprawling ranch house. Built from solid timber and stone, it reflected its owner's prosperity while maintaining frontier practicality. The main rooms were decorated for Christmas with pine boughs and red ribbons, and a large tree stood in the corner of the parlor, waiting to be trimmed for the evening's festivities. "Fletcher's cabin is just beyond the apple orchard," Martha mentioned as they looked out a window toward the west. "He fixed it up real nice this past fall. Added a proper stone chimney and glass windows. Said he wanted it to be suitable, though he wouldn't say for what." She gave Olivia a meaningful look. Olivia's cheeks warmed again at the implication. "Mr. McAllister seems to value him highly." "Thomas thinks of him as the son he never had," Martha confirmed. "He's been trying to convince Fletcher to consider a more permanent arrangement partnership in the ranch eventually. The young man has a good head for business, and the hands respect him." The conversation shifted to preparations for the Christmas Eve gathering, with Martha enlisting Olivia's help in arranging trays of food and completing the tree decorations. The work was pleasant, allowing Olivia to feel useful while learning more about Fletcher's life at the Circle M. By late afternoon, ranch hands and neighboring families began to arrive for the celebration. Olivia found herself warmly welcomed by everyone, introduced by Fletcher with evident pride as Miss Lancaster from Prescott, a special friend. The gathering was lively and informal music, provided by a ranch hand with a fiddle and another with a guitar, simple but delicious food laid out on long tables, and plenty of conversation and laughter. Children darted between adults, excited by the holiday and the treats Martha had prepared especially for them. Olivia noticed that Fletcher moved easily among the guests, respected by the men and warmly received by the women, with none of the wariness she remembered from their first meeting. Here he was established, trusted at home in a way she'd never seen before. As the evening progressed, McAllister called for attention, raising his glass in a toast. "To good neighbors, loyal hands, and cherished friends," he said, his gaze moving around the room. "May this Christmas bring you all the joy and peace you deserve." Glasses were raised in response, with calls of "Hear, hear," echoing through the room. As the general conversation resumed, McAllister made his way to where Fletcher and Olivia stood near the fireplace. "Miss Lancaster," he said, "I hope you'll forgive an old man's curiosity, but I'm mighty interested in how you and Fletcher came to know each other. He's been remarkably vague on the details." Fletcher shifted uncomfortably. "It's a complicated story, sir." "The best ones usually are," McAllister replied with a twinkle in his eye. "Especially when they end with a beautiful woman traveling all the way from Arizona Territory for a Christmas visit." Olivia exchanged a glance with Fletcher, receiving a slight nod of permission. "Mr. Blackwood saved me from a difficult situation," she said carefully. "My father had confined me against my will, and Fletcher helped me escape." McAllister's eyebrows rose. "Confined you? You mean he locked you up?" "In a storage room with barred windows," Olivia confirmed. "He believed he was protecting me from making poor decisions regarding my future." "Good Lord," McAllister muttered. "And Fletcher broke you out?" "Broke down the door and carried her to safety," Fletcher said with a self-deprecating smile, "though she gives me too much credit. She'd already decided to leave before I arrived." "Still," McAllister said thoughtfully, "that's quite a beginning to an acquaintance." He studied them both for a moment, then nodded as though confirming something to himself. Well, Miss Lancaster, I'm glad circumstances brought you to our part of the country, however unusual the path. As the party continued, Fletcher drew Olivia outside onto the covered porch. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant in the black sky above the snow-covered landscape. "I'm sorry about McAllister's questions," Fletcher said, leaning against a post. "He means well, but subtlety isn't his strong suit." "I don't mind," Olivia assured him. "He cares about you. That's evident in everything he does." Fletcher nodded, his expression thoughtful. "He's been more than an employer. When I arrived here, I was still looking over my shoulder every day, expecting Caldwell's men to appear. McAllister offered not just work, but a place to belong." "You've built a good life here," Olivia observed. "I have," he agreed. "For the first time in years, I'm thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present." His eyes met hers, intent and serious. "That's largely thanks to you." "Me?" Olivia asked, surprised. "I don't understand." Fletcher turned fully toward her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cold night air. "Your letters, Olivia. Knowing that someone that you saw value in me beyond my ability to ride or shoot or break down doors. You made me believe I could be more than a man on the run." His words touched something deep within her. "I simply saw you clearly, Fletcher, the man who risked everything to help a stranger, the man who values freedom and justice above his own safety." Fletcher's hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "May I kiss you, Olivia Lancaster?" "I've been wanting to since you stepped off that train." Her heart raced at the question, at the intensity in his gray eyes. "Yes," she whispered. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then with growing intensity as she responded. His hand slid from her cheek to cradle the back of her head, while her own hands came to rest against his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally parted, Olivia felt breathless, her entire being awake and alive in a way she'd never experienced. "I've been imagining that for months," Fletcher admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Reality surpasses imagination considerably." Olivia laughed softly, staying within the circle of his arms. "I concur with that assessment, Mr. Blackwood." The sound of the door opening behind them had them stepping apart, though Fletcher kept hold of her hand. Martha appeared, smiling knowingly at their flushed faces. "Dessert's being served," she announced, "though it seems you two have found your own sweetness out here in the cold." Fletcher chuckled. "We'll be right in, Martha." As the housekeeper disappeared back inside, Fletcher squeezed Olivia's hand gently. "We should join the others, but, Olivia, this conversation isn't finished." "I should hope not," she replied with more boldness than she'd known she possessed. The remainder of the evening passed in a pleasant blur, with Olivia acutely aware of Fletcher's presence wherever he moved in the room. Their eyes would meet across groups of people, exchanging silent messages that made her heart flutter and her cheeks warm. By the time the gathering began to disperse, with families heading home through the snowy night and ranch hands retiring to the bunkhouse, Olivia felt as though something fundamental had shifted between them. The kiss had changed everything, moving their relationship from possibility to reality. McAllister insisted that Fletcher and Olivia stay the night at the main house rather than making the journey back to Cheyenne in the dark. "Martha's prepared the guest room for Miss Lancaster," he said. "And Fletcher, you can take your usual room upstairs." The arrangements were perfectly proper, yet there was a knowing gleam in the old rancher's eye as he bid them good night. "Christmas breakfast is at 8, he added. "Nothing fancy, but Martha makes the best cinnamon rolls in the territory." In the guest room, which was simple but comfortable with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains framing the frosted windows, Olivia found herself too keyed up to sleep immediately. The day had been filled with new experiences and faces, culminating in that transformative moment on the porch. A soft knock at her door startled her from her reflections. Opening it a crack, she found Fletcher standing in the hallway, still fully dressed but without his boots. "I know it's late," he said quietly, "but I wondered if we might talk. In the kitchen, perhaps." Martha always leaves the stove banked for the night. It wasn't entirely proper to meet a man alone at this hour, but Olivia found she cared little for such considerations. "Let me get my shawl," she replied. The kitchen was warm and dimly lit by the glow from the cook stove. Fletcher pulled out a chair for Olivia at the small table Martha used for food preparation, then took the seat across from her. "I wanted to apologize if I was forward earlier," he began. "The kiss required no apology," Olivia interrupted gently. "It was mutual and welcome." Relief washed over his features. "Good, that's good." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly seeming uncertain. "Olivia, I need to be honest with you about something." Concern flickered through her. "What is it?" "When I invited you here, I told myself it was to see if our connection through letters would translate to something real in person. But that wasn't the whole truth." He met her gaze directly. "I invited you because I already knew how I felt. I've been falling in love with you since the day I broke down that door and found you standing in that room, brave and determined despite everything." Olivia's breath caught at the declaration. "Fletcher, you don't need to say anything," he continued quickly. "I know it's soon and we've spent more time apart than together. I just wanted you to understand my intentions. They're honorable, but they're also hopeful." Taking a deep breath, Olivia reached across the table to take his hand. "My intentions in accepting your invitation were equally hopeful," she said softly. "I wouldn't have traveled all this way for a casual reunion between friends." The tension in Fletcher's shoulders eased visibly. "So, we're on the same page." "I believe we are," she confirmed with a smile. "Though there are practical matters to consider. My life is in Prescott, yours is here." "About that," Fletcher said, a new certainty in his voice, "I've been thinking. McAllister has offered me a partnership in the ranch with an eye toward eventually taking over when he retires. It's a generous offer, one that would provide stability and a future." "That's wonderful," Olivia said sincerely. "You've earned his trust and respect." "Yes, but it would mean staying in Wyoming permanently, and I wouldn't ask you to give up the life you've built in Prescott unless—" He hesitated, then plunged forward. "Unless it was as my wife." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. "Are you proposing Fletcher Blackwood?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not officially." "Not yet," he clarified. "That would be presumptuous after so brief a reunion. But I am asking if you would consider the possibility of marriage, of a life here in Wyoming, of building something permanent together." Olivia's mind raced with the implications. Marriage to Fletcher would mean leaving Prescott, abandoning her position at the school, starting over again in a new place. Yet the prospect filled her not with trepidation, but with a sense of rightness, of coming home. "I would consider it," she said finally. "More than consider it. The idea of building a life with you, Fletcher, it feels like the natural conclusion to the story that began that night in Arizona." His hand tightened around hers. "I don't want to rush you, Olivia. You have 9 more days here. Use them to be certain. See the ranch, the town, the life that would be yours. If at the end of your visit you still feel this way." He smiled, hope brightening his features. "Well, then I'll have a proper question to ask." Olivia returned his smile, her heart full. "That seems like a sensible approach, Mr. Blackwood." "I do have my moments of practicality, Miss Lancaster." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. "Though they tend to desert me when you look at me like that." They talked for another hour. making plans for the remaining days of Olivia's visit, rides around the ranch property, a proper tour of Cheyenne, dinner at the hotel on New Year's Eve. Eventually, the lateness of the hour and the propriety of their situation compelled them to part. At her door, Fletcher kissed her once more, a gentle, promising kiss that left her both satisfied and longing for more. "Merry Christmas, Olivia," he murmured against her lips. "Merry Christmas, Fletcher," she replied, reluctantly stepping back into her room. As she prepared for bed, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been a prisoner in her father's house, with no prospects beyond eventual marriage to someone of his choosing. Now she stood on the threshold of a future she'd chosen for herself: independence, meaningful work, and the possibility of marriage to a man she respected and desired in equal measure. Whatever the coming days might bring, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she'd never regret the journey that had brought her to this moment. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, with sunlight sparkling on the pristine snow surrounding the ranch. Olivia woke to the delicious aroma of cinnamon rolls and coffee wafting through the house. Dressing quickly in her green wool dress, saved specifically for Christmas, she made her way to the kitchen, where Martha was orchestrating a breakfast feast. "Merry Christmas, dear," the housekeeper greeted her warmly. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," Olivia replied, not mentioning that her dreams had been filled with a certain tall cowboy and possibilities for the future. "May I help with anything?" Martha set her to work arranging plates and silverware, chatting companionably about Christmases passed at the Circle M. "Thomas loves the holiday," she explained. "Says it reminds him of his childhood back east, before he caught the frontier fever." Fletcher and McAllister joined them shortly, both men freshly shaved and dressed in their Sunday best. Fletcher's eyes lit up when he saw Olivia, appreciation evident in his gaze as it traveled over her green dress. "Merry Christmas," he said, coming to stand beside her. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, pleased by his reaction. "Merry Christmas to you as well." Breakfast was a cheerful affair, with McAllister regaling them with stories of early days on the ranch, and Martha insisting everyone have seconds of her famous cinnamon rolls. Afterward, they gathered in the parlor, where, to Olivia's surprise, presents waited beneath the tree. "Nothing extravagant," McAllister assured her when she expressed concern about not having brought gifts. "Just small tokens to mark the day." From Martha, Olivia received a hand-knitted scarf in soft blue wool. "To keep you warm in our Wyoming winters," the housekeeper explained with a meaningful glance toward Fletcher. McAllister presented her with a small leather-bound book of poetry by Longfellow. "Fletcher mentioned you enjoy reading," he said. "Thought you might appreciate this." "It's perfect," Olivia said sincerely, touched by their thoughtfulness. "Thank you both so much." When Fletcher's turn came, he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "It's not much," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. Olivia unwrapped it carefully to find a small wooden box with intricate carving on the lid, a rose pattern surrounding her initials. "All." Opening it, she gasped at the contents: a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a key suspended on a fine chain. "Fletcher, it's beautiful," she breathed, lifting the necklace to examine it more closely. "I had it made in Cheyenne," he explained. "The key seemed appropriate given how we met." The symbolism wasn't lost on Olivia: a key, representing freedom, opportunity, and the opening of doors, both literal and metaphorical. "Will you help me put it on?" she asked, holding out the necklace. Fletcher took it with careful fingers, and Olivia turned, lifting her hair to allow him to fasten the clasp around her neck. His hands were steady but lingered briefly on her skin, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. "Thank you," she said softly when she turned back to face him. "I'll treasure it always." The rest of Christmas Day passed in pleasant leisure, a walk through the snow-covered property, a substantial midday dinner that left everyone pleasantly full, and quiet conversation by the fire as darkness fell early over the winter landscape. By unspoken agreement, Fletcher and Olivia found themselves alone in the parlor after McAllister retired early and Martha busied herself in the kitchen. The only light came from the crackling fire and a single lamp, casting the room in a warm, intimate glow. "Happy?" Fletcher asked, watching as Olivia absently touched the key pendant at her throat. "Completely," she replied with a smile. "This has been the most wonderful Christmas I can remember." Fletcher reached for her hand, drawing her closer on the sofa they shared. "I've been thinking about what we discussed last night," he said, his voice low and serious. "About giving you time to consider a future here." "Yes," Olivia prompted when he paused. "I realized I should be completely honest about what that future might entail," he continued. "The ranch work is demanding, the winter's harsh. Cheyenne is growing, but it's not Phoenix or even Prescott in terms of culture and society. And while Caldwell seems to be no longer a threat, I can't promise that ghosts from my past won't resurface someday." Olivia appreciated his candor. "I understand the challenges, Fletcher. I'm not looking for an easy life, just a meaningful one." "And children?" he asked, his eyes intent on hers. "Is that something you would want someday?" The question caught her by surprise, not in its content but in the vulnerability behind it. "Yes," she said softly. "Very much. Would you?" A smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "More than I realized until recently. Watching the families at the gathering yesterday, seeing the children's excitement, it made me imagine what it might be like to have a family of my own. With you." The image his words conjured, a home filled with love and laughter, children with Fletcher's gray eyes and her auburn hair, filled Olivia with longing so intense it was almost painful. "I can see it too," she admitted, squeezing his hand. "And it's a beautiful vision." Fletcher's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her lower lip. "Olivia Lancaster, you've undone me completely, you know that." "Good," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "Because you've had the same effect on me, Fletcher Blackwood." His kiss was deeper this time, confident and possessive in a way that made her heart race and her body respond with unexpected heat. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily, and Olivia knew her cheeks must be flushed with more than just the fire's warmth. "I should probably say good night," Fletcher said reluctantly, his voice rough, "before propriety becomes a distant memory." Olivia nodded, equally reluctant but aware of their surroundings and situation. "Probably wise," she agreed, though she made no move to release his hand. After another lingering kiss that threatened to undermine their good intentions, Fletcher finally stood. "Sweet dreams, Olivia," he said, pressing a final kiss to her forehead. "They will be," she promised, watching as he left the parlor with evident reluctance. The remaining days of Olivia's visit passed in a blur of shared experiences and deepening connection. They rode out across the ranch property, Fletcher proudly showing her the operations he supervised, the cattle in their winter pastures, the hay storage that would see the animals through until spring, the plans for expansion in the coming year. "McAllister wants to build a proper house here," he explained, pointing to a rise overlooking a creek. "For his foreman-turned-partner." "It's a beautiful location," Olivia observed, imagining a home nestled among the pine trees with windows facing the mountains. "I thought so too," Fletcher said, his meaning clear in the way he watched her reaction. They spent New Year's Eve in Cheyenne, dining at the hotel restaurant, and then joining the town's celebration in the main square. At midnight, as fireworks exploded overhead and cheers erupted from the crowd, Fletcher pulled Olivia into a shadowed doorway for a kiss that promised far more than the year ahead. "I love you," he said against her lips, the words simple but profound. "I think I have since the moment you climbed onto that horse behind me, ready to face whatever came next." "I love you too," Olivia replied, the declaration feeling like the most natural thing in the world. "My brave, honorable cowboy." On their final full day together, Fletcher took Olivia to see his cabin on the ranch property. The small structure was indeed, as Martha had described, fixed up real nice, a solid building with glass windows, a stone fireplace, and simple but well-made furniture. "It's not much," Fletcher said as they stood in the main room, "but it's mine. First place I've owned outright since before Caldwell put a price on my head." Olivia moved around the space, noting the small touches that made it a home book stacked beside a comfortable chair, a quilt that looked like Martha's handiwork on the bed, a photograph of a younger Fletcher with an older couple she assumed were his parents. "I think it's perfect," she said honestly. "It feels like you." Fletcher watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It could be ours," he said quietly. "Temporarily until the larger house is built, if you wanted." The implication was clear, and Olivia's heart raced at the directness of his suggestion. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Fletcher Blackwood?" He crossed the room to stand before her, taking both her hands in his. "I had planned to wait until tonight at dinner with a proper ring and all. But standing here with you, in this place I've made for myself for us, I can't wait another moment." Dropping to one knee, still holding her hands, Fletcher looked up with such love in his eyes that Olivia felt tears gathering in her own. "Olivia Lancaster, from the moment I broke down that door and carried you out of your father's house, my life has had new purpose and meaning. You've shown me that a man can be more than his past, that he can build something worthwhile if he has the right partner beside him." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you make a life with me here in Wyoming as my wife, my partner, and someday, God willing, the mother of our children?" Through her tears, Olivia smiled brilliantly. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Fletcher, I will marry you." He rose, gathering her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to one another. When they finally parted, both were laughing and crying at once, overwhelmed by the moment and the future it represented. "I do have a ring," Fletcher admitted, reaching into his pocket. "It's not fancy, but I don't need fancy," Olivia assured him as he produced a simple gold band with a small diamond set in the center. "I just need you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "We can be married before you return to Prescott," he suggested, "if that's not too soon. Judge Wilson could perform the ceremony. Then you could go back, settle your affairs, and return as Mrs. Blackwood." The practicality of his plan made Olivia smile. "Always the strategic thinker, aren't you? But yes, that would be perfect." "I'll need to give notice at the school, pack my belongings, say goodbye to friends. And then come home," Fletcher finished, his arms tightening around her. "To me." The word home resonated through Olivia's being. After years of feeling trapped, then months of independence tinged with loneliness, she had found where she truly belonged, not in a place, but with a person who valued her freedom as much as her presence in his life. "Home," she agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. 3 days later, on a bright January morning, Olivia Lancaster became Olivia Blackwood in a simple ceremony at the Circle M Ranch. Judge Wilson officiated, with McAllister standing up for Fletcher and Martha for Olivia. The small gathering included several ranch hands and neighboring families, who had welcomed Olivia so warmly at the Christmas celebration. Olivia wore her green wool dress with Martha's blue scarf, and Fletcher cut a handsome figure in a new suit purchased specifically for the occasion. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with such evident sincerity that Martha dabbed at her eyes throughout the ceremony. "By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming," Judge Wilson proclaimed with a broad smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Fletcher, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience yet expressing the depth of feeling between them. When they turned to face their friends, Olivia was struck by the rightness of it all, this unexpected family she had found in a place she'd never imagined calling home. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful, with food prepared by Martha and music provided by the same ranch hands who had played at Christmas. McAllister made a toast that had everyone laughing and Fletcher blushing, alluding to the unusual circumstances of their first meeting with good-humored appreciation for the outcome. As the afternoon waned, Fletcher led Olivia away from the festivities toward a waiting buggy. "McAllister insisted we spend our wedding night at the hotel in Cheyenne," he explained, a hint of color touching his cheekbones. "Said newlyweds deserve privacy and a proper bed." Now it was Olivia's turn to blush, though anticipation rather than embarrassment was the primary emotion coursing through her. That was thoughtful of him. They said their goodbyes amid good-natured teasing and well wishes, promises to return soon, and Martha's assurance that she would have the cabin prepared for their permanent residence when Olivia returned from Prescott. The ride to Cheyenne was filled with conversation about practical matters, how long Olivia would need in Prescott, what Fletcher would accomplish in her absence, plans for their future together. Yet beneath the ordinary discussion ran a current of awareness, of the night that awaited them and the lifetime that would follow. In their hotel, suite the finest in the establishment, another of McAllister's wedding gifts, all practicality finally gave way to the desire they'd been restraining since their first kiss on the porch at Christmas. "Mrs. Blackwood," Fletcher murmured as he helped her remove her coat, his fingers lingering on her shoulders. "I'm not sure I'll ever tire of saying that." "I certainly won't tire of hearing it," Olivia replied, turning in his arms to face him. "Especially when you say it like that." What followed was everything Olivia had dreamed of and more: tenderness and passion, patience and urgency. The physical expression of a love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. In Fletcher's arms, she found a freedom more profound than any she'd known before, the freedom to be fully herself, loved completely for who she was. Later, as moonlight spilled through the hotel window and Fletcher slept beside her, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From imprisonment to liberation, from isolation to connection, from fear to love, each step had been necessary. Each challenge overcome had made her stronger. She thought of her father, hoping that someday he might understand that his efforts to confine her had only driven her toward the very thing he feared, a life beyond his control, shaped by her own choices and desires. Perhaps in time, reconciliation might be possible. For now, she would focus on the future she and Fletcher were building together. The following day brought a tearful but hopeful parting at the train station. Olivia would return to Prescott, wrap up her affairs, and be back in Wyoming within a month. "It's not goodbye," Fletcher reminded her as they stood on the platform, his arms tight around her. "Just a brief separation before our real life begins." "Our real life has already begun," Olivia corrected him, touching the wedding band on her finger. "This is just a practical interlude." His kiss was a promise of return, of reunion. of a lifetime together that neither could have imagined when a desperate father locked away his daughter and a determined cowboy broke down the door to set her free. 1 year later, Olivia stood on the porch of their new home, a sturdy two-story house built on the rise overlooking the creek, just as Fletcher had envisioned. Behind her, through the open door, came the sound of laughter as McAllister regaled their dinner guests with yet another tale of Fletcher's exploits as ranch foreman. The partnership between the two men had flourished, with Fletcher gradually taking on more responsibility as McAllister eased into a well-deserved semi-retirement. The Circle M had expanded its operations, acquiring neighboring land and increasing its cattle herd, becoming one of the most prosperous ranches in the region. Olivia had found her own place in the community, teaching at the small school established for the children of ranch employees and neighboring families. The work fulfilled her in ways she'd always hoped, allowing her to share her love of learning while building relationships with the families who had welcomed her so warmly. A gentle kick from within reminded her of the newest chapter about to begin in their story. At 7 months pregnant, Olivia carried the physical evidence of the love she and Fletcher had found together. Their child, a son, according to Martha's confident prediction, would be born as spring renewed the land, a fitting symbol for a family built on second chances and new beginnings. Warm arms encircled her from behind, Fletcher's hands coming to rest protectively over the swell of their child. "Everything all right out here?" he asked, his voice close to her ear. "Perfect," Olivia replied, leaning back against his solid strength. "I was just thinking about how far we've come in a year." Fletcher pressed a kiss to her temple. "Having regrets about trading Arizona sunshine for Wyoming snow? Not a single one," she assured him, turning in his arms to face him. "Though I might revisit that position in February when the blizzards hit." He laughed, the sound still one of her favorite things in the world. "Fair enough, but I promise to keep you warm." "You always do," she said softly, rising on tiptoe to kiss him properly. A discreet cough from the doorway interrupted them. "Dessert's being served," Martha announced, her expression fond as she regarded the couple. "Though I can see you two have sweeter things on your minds." Fletcher grinned, keeping one arm around Olivia as they followed Martha back inside. "Can you blame me, Martha? Look at my wife." "Shameless flatterer," Olivia murmured, though she glowed under his admiration. Later, after their guests had departed, and the house was quiet save for the crackling of the fire in the hearth, Fletcher and Olivia sat together in the parlor, her feet in his lap as he gently massaged them, a nightly ritual since her pregnancy had begun to make standing uncomfortable. "I received a letter today," Olivia said, breaking a comfortable silence, "from my father." Fletcher's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their careful work. "What did he say?" "He's ill," she replied, watching her husband's face carefully. "Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that he's been forced to sell the ranch and move into town." "I'm sorry to hear that," Fletcher said, and she knew he meant it despite the complicated history. "Will you want to visit him?" The question held no judgment, only support for whatever she might decide. It was one of countless reasons why she loved this man so deeply. "I've been thinking about it," Olivia admitted. "After the baby comes, perhaps in the summer, I'd like him to meet his grandson to see the life I've built." "If he's willing," Fletcher nodded thoughtfully. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If that means a family journey to Arizona, then that's what we'll do." Olivia felt a rush of gratitude for his understanding. "Thank you." "For what?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "For never trying to lock me in or control me," she said simply. "For understanding that love without freedom isn't love at all." Fletcher's expression softened as he moved to sit beside her, drawing her close against his side. I learned that lesson long before I met you, watching men like Caldwell destroy what they claimed to cherish by trying to possess it completely. He placed his hand over their growing child, a gesture that never failed to move Olivia deeply. Besides, why would I need to control you when you've freely chosen to build this life with me? That's a gift far more precious than any forced loyalty could ever be. In the quiet of their home, with night falling over the Wyoming landscape they both had come to love, Olivia Lancaster Blackwood counted her blessings a husband who cherished her independence as much as her love, a child growing beneath her heart, meaningful work that fulfilled her mind and spirit, and a community that had embraced her as one of their own. From the prison of her fathers making to the freedom of a life chosen, her journey had been unexpected in every way. Yet as Fletcher's lips found hers in a kiss that still held all the passion of their first embrace, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that every step, even the painful ones, had led exactly where she was meant to be. In the strong arms of the cowboy who had broken down her door and carried her not just to safety, but to a love more powerful than any chain or bar could ever contain,